I never thought a metal box on the side of my house would cost the homeowners association $30,000, but here we are. My name is Jason Fisher, and I have lived in the Riverside Meadows subdivision in Naperville, Illinois, for 8 years. The place is nice enough, with well-maintained lawns, decent neighbors, and a community pool that actually gets cleaned regularly. But like most HOAs, ours had that one person who made everyone's life miserable. Her name was Patricia Henderson, and she was the president of our HOA board for the past 4 years. Patricia was the kind of woman who measured your grass height with an actual ruler and filed complaints if it exceeded the allowed 3 inches. She wore her blonde hair in that specific haircut that seemed to be standard issue for HOA presidents everywhere, drove a white Lexus SUV, and had that permanent expression of someone who had just smelled something faintly unpleasant. She was 52 years old and had nothing better to do than patrol our neighborhood looking for violations. The whole mess started in late October. I had been having issues with my main heating system, an older gas furnace that was on its last legs. The repair guy, a friendly older man named Tom, told me it would probably make it through the winter but recommended I get a backup heat source just in case. Given that Illinois winters can drop well below 0, I took his advice seriously. I had a wife and 2 kids to think about. The last thing I wanted was for the furnace to die at 2 in the morning during a January cold snap, so I did what any reasonable homeowner would do. I went to Home Depot and bought a supplemental electric heating unit designed to work as a backup system. It was essentially an industrial-grade space heater that could be installed outside and connected to your home's ductwork. The unit itself was about 3 feet tall, 2 feet wide, made of gray metal and sat on a concrete pad. It was not a thing of beauty, I will admit that, but it was functional and safe. The installation guy mounted it on the side of my house, the north side where it was barely visible from the street. I thought nothing of it. The unit blended in reasonably well with the siding, and unless you were specifically looking for it, you would not notice it. More importantly, it gave me peace of mind knowing that if the main furnace failed, my family would not freeze. 3 days after installation, I found the letter in my mailbox. It was on the official Riverside Meadows HOA letterhead, signed by Patricia Henderson herself. The letter informed me that I had violated Section 7.3 of the HOA covenants regarding exterior modifications and aesthetic standards. According to Patricia, my backup heating unit was an eyesore that negatively impacted the community's appearance and property values. I had 14 days to remove it or face daily fines of $50. I read the letter 3 times, feeling my blood pressure rise with each reading. The backup heater was on the side of my house, barely visible, and served a critical safety function. But according to Patricia and her interpretation of the rules, it had to go. That evening, I called the HOA office and got Patricia's voicemail. I left a polite message explaining the situation and requesting a meeting to discuss the matter. She called me back the next day. "Mr. Fisher, the rules are quite clear," Patricia said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Any exterior modifications require prior approval from the Architectural Review Committee. You did not submit an application." "Patricia, it is a backup heater," I replied, trying to keep my tone even. "It is a safety device. My main furnace is failing, and I need this in case it goes out completely." "That is not my concern," she said flatly. "You have multiple options. You can install a new furnace or you can install a heating system that is not visible from the exterior. The rules exist for a reason." "A new furnace costs $8,000, I said. "I am planning to replace it in the spring, but I need something to get through this winter." Again, not my concern. You have 13 days remaining. Good day, Mr. Fisher. She hung up before I could respond. I spent the next few days researching the HOA covenants and my options. The documents were a mess of legal language, but as far as I could tell, there was a provision for emergency safety equipment. I drafted a formal letter citing this provision and requesting a hearing before the full HOA board. I delivered it personally to Patricia's house, a massive 2-story colonial that was, ironically, the most ostentatious property in the entire subdivision. She answered the door in yoga pants and a designer sweater, her small dog yapping at her feet. "Mr. Fisher," she said, not inviting me in. "What can I do for you?" I handed her the letter. "I am formally requesting a hearing before the board regarding the citation. I believe the heater falls under the emergency safety equipment provision." Patricia barely glanced at the letter. "The next board meeting is not until December 15th. Your 14 days will be up by then. You will have already accumulated fines." "Then I am requesting an emergency meeting," I said. "The bylaws state that any homeowner can request one with 48 hours notice for urgent matters." Her expression tightened. She was clearly not used to people actually reading the bylaws. "Fine. I will convene the board. You will be notified of the date and time." The emergency meeting was scheduled for November 3rd, exactly 1 week after I received the initial letter. It was held in the community center, a small building near the neighborhood entrance. The board consisted of Patricia and 3 other members: Robert Chen, a quiet accountant who rarely spoke; Linda Morrison, a retired teacher who generally went along with whatever Patricia wanted; and Michael Torres, a lawyer who had recently joined the board and seemed less impressed with Patricia's antics. I arrived 15 minutes early with a folder full of documentation: photos of the heater, the installation permit from the city, information about the safety concerns, and highlighted sections of the HOA covenants. My wife, Grace, came with me for moral support. She was 8 months pregnant with our 3rd child and not happy about any of this stress. Patricia called the meeting to order at 7 p.m. sharp. The board sat at a folding table at the front of the room while Grace and I sat in plastic chairs facing them. There were a few other homeowners in attendance, including my neighbor Dave Winters, who had his own ongoing disputes with Patricia over a fence that she claimed was 6 inches too tall. "We are here to discuss the violation notice issued to Mr. Jason Fisher regarding an unauthorized exterior heating unit," Patricia began, reading from a prepared statement. "Mr. Fisher has requested this hearing to contest the violation. Mr. Fisher, you may present your case." I stood and laid out my argument. The main furnace was failing. A new one would cost $8,000 that I did not have readily available. Illinois winters were dangerous without adequate heating, and the backup unit qualified as emergency safety equipment under Section 12.8 of the covenants. I showed photos demonstrating that the unit was barely visible and did not impact anyone's property values. I presented the city permit proving the installation was legal and up to code. Patricia listened with barely concealed impatience, tapping her pen on the table. "Mr. Fisher, I appreciate your thoroughness," she said when I finished, "but the Architectural Review Committee has already determined that the unit violates aesthetic standards. The emergency provision you cite applies to temporary measures, not permanent installations." "It is temporary," I countered. "I am replacing the main furnace in the spring. This is just to get through the winter safely." "Then you should have no problem removing it once winter is over," Patricia said. "But the fact remains, it is there now, it is visible, and it was installed without approval. The violation stands." Michael Torres cleared his throat. Actually, Patricia, I think Jason has a point. If this is genuinely a safety issue and the equipment is temporary, we might have some flexibility here. Patricia shot him a look that could have frozen nitrogen. The rules are the rules, Michael. We cannot make exceptions or everyone will want one. But we have made exceptions, Michael said, pulling out his own folder. Last year you approved the Henderson's exterior generator, which is significantly larger and more visible than Jason's heater. That is different, Patricia snapped. The Hendersons submitted a proper application, which they filed after installation, Michael said, reading from his notes. According to the meeting minutes, they installed it first and applied retroactively. You approved it anyway. The room went silent. Patricia's face flushed red. I think we should table this, Robert Chen said quietly, speaking for the first time. Give Jason time to submit a proper application and we can review it at the regular December meeting. And the fines? I asked. Suspended pending review, Michael said, looking at Patricia. All in favor? Robert and Michael raised their hands. Linda hesitated, then slowly raised hers as well. Patricia glared at all of them but was outvoted. Fine, she said coldly. Submit your application by November 15th. We will review it at the December meeting. I left feeling cautiously optimistic. Grace squeezed my hand as we walked to the car. She's going to make this difficult, you know that, right? I know, I said, but at least we have Michael on our side. I submitted the application the next day, well ahead of the deadline. It was thorough and professional, with photos, documentation, and a detailed explanation of why the heater was necessary. I even included a letter from Tom, my HVAC guy, confirming that my main furnace was on borrowed time and could fail at any moment. November turned into December, and Illinois did what Illinois does best in winter. It got brutally cold. We had an early cold snap in mid-November where temperatures dropped to 15 degrees. My main furnace struggled, but kept running. The backup heater sat there, ready if needed, giving me peace of mind. The December 15th board meeting finally arrived. This time I came alone. Grace was too close to her due date to sit through another HOA meeting. The meeting was, once again, in the community center. There were more homeowners in attendance this time, word having spread about my fight with Patricia. Patricia called the meeting to order and immediately launched into her attack. My application was denied, she announced, because the Architectural Review Committee, which consisted of Patricia and Linda, determined that the heater negatively impacted the neighborhood aesthetics and set a bad precedent. Furthermore, Patricia continued, the original violation still stands. Starting tomorrow, fines will begin accruing at $50 per day until the unit is removed. I could not believe what I was hearing. You are kidding me. We had an agreement. The fines were suspended pending this review. The review is complete, Patricia said smugly. Your application is denied. Remove the heater or pay the fines. Michael Torres looked furious. Patricia, this is ridiculous. You are letting personal feelings override common sense. The man needs heat for his family. The man needs to follow the rules like everyone else, Patricia shot back. The meeting devolved into arguing. Several other homeowners spoke up in my defense, including Dave Winters, who pointed out Patricia's pattern of selective enforcement. But Patricia would not budge. The vote was called. Patricia and Linda voted to deny the application and enforce the fines. Michael and Robert voted in my favor. 2-2, which meant the motion failed, and Patricia's decision as board president stood. I left that meeting knowing I had to make a choice. I could not afford $50 a day in fines, which would add up to $1,500 a month. But I also could not risk my family's safety by removing the only backup heat source I had. I decided to keep the heater and prepare for a legal fight. Christmas came and went. My main furnace continued to struggle along, though it was making concerning noises. I kept the thermostat at 68 degrees to avoid overtaxing it. The backup heater remained in place, and I received a bill from the HOA in early January for $1,850 in accumulated fines. I did not pay it. January brought the kind of cold that makes you question why anyone lives in Illinois. We had several days where the temperature did not get above zero, and the wind chill made it feel like 20 below. My furnace was working overtime, and I could hear it struggling every time it kicked on. Then came January 23rd. I will never forget that date. I woke up at 6 in the morning to a house that felt noticeably colder than usual. I checked the thermostat. It read 58 degrees and the furnace was not running. I went down to the basement and found exactly what I had been dreading. The furnace had finally given up the ghost. It was completely dead. No power, no ignition, nothing. Tom could not come until the following day because everyone's heating systems were failing in the extreme cold. Thank God I had the backup heater. I went outside in my bathrobe and heavy coat, trudging through 6 inches of snow, and manually activated the backup system. It hummed to life, and within an hour, the house was back up to a comfortable temperature. My kids did not even realize anything had happened. Grace, now a week past her due date and miserable, was just grateful to be warm. I called Tom and told him what happened. He came by that afternoon, looked at the furnace and confirmed it was toast. The heat exchanger had cracked, which meant the whole unit needed to be replaced. He could not do it until the following week because he was completely slammed with emergency calls. "Good thing you have that backup," Tom said, gesturing toward the exterior unit. "A lot of folks are not so lucky." I have been getting calls from people with frozen pipes and flooded basements. Frozen pipes. The thought had not even occurred to me. That evening I got a call from Dave Winters. "Jason, you need to see this. Patricia's pipes burst." I grabbed my coat and walked 3 houses down to Patricia's colonial. There were 2 plumbing vans in her driveway, and I could see through the front window that there were large fans and dehumidifiers set up inside. Dave met me on the sidewalk. "Her main furnace went out this morning, same as yours," Dave explained. "But she did not have a backup. Pipes in her exterior walls froze and burst, flooded her whole first floor. I heard one of the plumbers say it is at least $30,000 in damage, maybe more." I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I just felt tired. "That is awful," I said, and I meant it. I did not like Patricia, but I did not wish this on her. "It gets better," Dave said. "Or worse, depending on how you look at it. Apparently, 6 other houses lost heat today and 5 of them have pipe damage." All because Patricia convinced people that backup heating systems were unsightly and refused to let anyone install them. My stomach dropped. "What?" Dave nodded grimly. "I have been talking to folks." Apparently, Patricia denied at least 4 other applications for backup heaters over the past 2 years. Those people trusted the HOA and did not install them. Now they are all dealing with frozen pipes and water damage. This was bigger than I thought. This was not just Patricia being petty with me. This was Patricia's decisions causing real, significant damage to multiple homeowners. The next few days were chaos in Riverside Meadows. As word spread about the extent of the damage, more homeowners came forward with stories of Patricia denying reasonable requests for safety equipment. The total number of homes with frozen pipe damage reached 9. The damage estimates ranged from $15,000 to $60,000 per home. The total was well over $300,000 in damages, all because homes lacked adequate backup heating during an admittedly rare but not unprecedented cold snap. Several homeowners, including Dave, started organizing. They wanted Patricia removed from the board and were exploring legal action against the HOA for negligence. I was contacted by a lawyer named Ellen Shapiro, who was gathering information for a potential class action lawsuit. The HOA has a duty of care to homeowners, Ellen explained when we met in her office in downtown Naperville. By denying safety equipment that could have prevented foreseeable damage, especially in a climate like Illinois, Patricia and the board may have breached that duty. What about my fines? I asked. Do not pay them, Ellen said firmly. In fact, I think you have grounds for a countersuit. You attempted to prevent exactly this kind of situation, and Patricia penalized you for it. Meanwhile, you are the only one in that group without damage precisely because you ignored her order. I went home and told Grace everything. She was in nesting mode, organizing the nursery for the 1,000th time, but she stopped and listened. So what are you going to do? She asked. I think I am going to fight this, I said. Not just for us, but for everyone else she has bullied. Grace nodded. Good. Someone needs to stand up to her. The emergency HOA meeting was called for February 1st. It was not called by Patricia. It was called by a coalition of homeowners who had gathered enough signatures to trigger a special election for the board. The community center was packed. Every seat was filled and people lined the walls. I had never seen this many neighbors in one place. Patricia looked shaken as she sat at the board table. For once, her perfect hair was slightly disheveled, and she lacked her usual confidence. Michael Torres took the lead in running the meeting. We are here to address serious concerns about HOA management and decisions that may have contributed to significant property damage, Michael began. Multiple homeowners have come forward with evidence that safety equipment applications were denied without proper consideration or justification. One by one, homeowners stood and told their stories. A young couple with a newborn described coming home to find their basement flooded with frozen, burst pipes. An elderly man on a fixed income explained that he could not afford the $22,000 in repairs to his home. A single mother showed photos of her ruined hardwood floors and destroyed furniture. When it was my turn, I kept it simple. I installed a backup heater to protect my family. Patricia fined me for it. My house is the only one on this block without water damage. That should tell you everything you need to know about whose judgment was correct. The room erupted in applause. Patricia looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Then came the bombshell. Robert Chen, the quiet accountant, stood up with a folder of documents. I have been reviewing HOA finances at the request of several homeowners, Robert said, and I found some irregularities I need to report. Patricia went pale. Robert explained that he had discovered Patricia had been approving contractor work for common areas without competitive bids, and several of those contractors were owned by her brother-in-law. The work was overpriced, and the HOA had been overpaying by an estimated 40%. Over 4 years, Patricia had essentially funneled about $60,000 in HOA fees to her family through this scheme. That is embezzlement, someone shouted from the back. That is fraud, another voice added. Patricia tried to defend herself, stammering something about coincidence and competitive pricing, but no one was buying it. Michael Torres, in his capacity as a lawyer, calmly stated that the evidence would need to be turned over to the proper authorities, and that Patricia should probably retain legal counsel. The vote to remove Patricia from the board was unanimous minus her own vote. Linda Morrison also resigned on the spot, clearly wanting to distance herself from the scandal. New board members were elected that night, including Dave Winters and a retired engineer named Margaret Thompson. Michael Torres was elected as the new president. One of their first official acts was to void all of my fines related to the backup heater. The second was to formally approve backup heating systems for any homeowner who wanted one, with streamlined applications and reasonable aesthetic guidelines. But the story was not over yet. In late February, the Naperville Police Department began investigating Patricia for embezzlement and fraud. The HOA's attorney provided all of Robert's findings to the authorities. Ellen Shapiro filed a class action lawsuit against Patricia personally and the HOA for negligence, seeking damages for all 9 homeowners affected by the frozen pipes. Grace gave birth to our daughter, Emma, on February 14th, Valentine's Day. We brought her home to a warm house with a new furnace finally installed and a backup heating system that was now HOA approved. The irony was not lost on me. The legal proceedings took months to unfold. In April, Patricia Henderson was formally charged with multiple counts of theft and fraud. The evidence was overwhelming. Her brother-in-law, the contractor, was also charged as an accomplice. They had been running the scheme for years, not just in Riverside Meadows but in 2 other HOAs where Patricia had served on boards. The criminal trial began in September. I attended several days of testimony, partly because I was curious and partly because the prosecutor wanted me available as a character witness to establish Patricia's pattern of behavior. Watching her sit at the defense table, no longer the imperious HOA president, but just a middle-aged woman facing serious consequences for her actions, was surreal. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts. Patricia was sentenced in November to 3 years in prison and ordered to pay full restitution of $68,000 to the affected HOAs. Her brother-in-law got 2 years and his own restitution order. Both of them would be felons, unable to serve on HOA boards or hold positions of financial trust again. The civil lawsuit settled out of court in December. The HOA's insurance paid out $240,000 to the 9 homeowners with frozen pipe damage. It was not enough to cover all expenses for everyone, but it helped significantly. The insurance company then went after Patricia personally to recoup their costs, which meant she would be paying off debt for years, even after her prison sentence ended. As for me and my family, things returned to normal, or as normal as life can be with 3 kids under 7. The backup heater sat on the side of my house, no longer a source of controversy, just a quiet metal box doing its job. My new furnace worked perfectly, but I kept the backup system active just in case. Better safe than sorry. The new HOA board under Michael's leadership was a breath of fresh air. They focused on actual community improvement rather than petty rule enforcement. The neighborhood pool got resurfaced. The playgrounds were updated with new equipment. People actually enjoyed living in Riverside Meadows again, instead of living in fear of violation notices. Dave Winters finally got his fence issue resolved. Margaret Thompson started a neighborhood garden club. The community center began hosting monthly social events. It was what an HOA should be, a group of neighbors working together to maintain and improve their community, not a fiefdom for petty tyrants. I ran into Tom, my HVAC guy, at the hardware store in January, almost exactly a year after the furnace failure that started everything. He recognized me and came over. "Jason Fisher, right? How is that backup heater working out for you?" "Saved my bacon last winter," I said. "Best money I ever spent, even with all the drama." Tom laughed. "I heard about all that. The HOA president who went to prison, right? That was wild. I actually have been getting a lot more calls to install backup systems. People do not want to risk it." "Smart," I said, "especially around here." "You know what is funny?" Tom said. I tried to get a backup system installed at my own house years ago. My HOA denied it. After what happened with you guys, I resubmitted my application, approved in 3 days. We both laughed at that. Sometimes it takes a disaster to make people see sense. I paid for my purchases and headed home. It was a cold January afternoon, the kind where your breath freezes in the air and your nose hairs freeze when you inhale. But my house was warm. My family was safe. And the metal box on the side of my house, the ugly backup heater that started a war with the HOA, hummed along quietly, doing exactly what it was supposed to do. The whole experience taught me some valuable lessons. First, sometimes standing up for what is right means standing alone, at least at first. When I refused to remove that heater despite the fines and pressure, I felt isolated. But my willingness to fight encouraged others to speak up about their own experiences with Patricia's abuse of power. Second, rules should serve people, not the other way around. Patricia treated the HOA covenants like sacred scripture, to be enforced to the letter regardless of circumstances or common sense. A good rule structure has flexibility for legitimate exceptions, especially when safety is involved. The new board understood this, which was why they rewrote several sections of the covenants to include clearer language about emergency equipment and safety modifications. Third, power without accountability corrupts quickly. Patricia had run the HOA like her personal kingdom for 4 years, and no one had seriously challenged her until the frozen pipe disaster. If Robert Chen had not found the financial irregularities, we might never have known about the embezzlement. Now the new board had implemented quarterly financial reviews and required competitive bids for any work over $5,000. Fourth, and perhaps most importantly, documentation matters. I kept copies of every letter, every email, every photo, and every interaction with Patricia and the HOA. When it came time to defend myself and eventually support the legal cases against her, that documentation was crucial. Ellen Shapiro told me that my meticulous record-keeping made the negligence case much stronger. The ripple effects of what happened in Riverside Meadows spread beyond our subdivision. The local news picked up the story, and it became a cautionary tale about HOA overreach. Several other communities in Naperville and surrounding areas began reviewing their own HOA policies regarding safety equipment. The Illinois state legislature even proposed a bill that would protect homeowners from HOA penalties when installing emergency safety equipment. Though as of this writing, it is still working through committee. Patricia's house, the massive colonial that she was so proud of, went into foreclosure during her criminal trial. Between legal fees, restitution payments, and her own frozen pipe damage that insurance only partially covered, she could not keep up with the mortgage. A young family bought it in a short sale for well below market value. They were nice people, grateful to be in the neighborhood, and they followed HOA rules without anyone having to threaten them. Imagine that. Grace and I celebrated our 10th anniversary that spring. We had dinner at a nice Italian restaurant in downtown Naperville, and over wine and pasta, we talked about everything we had been through that year. "I am proud of you," Grace said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "You could have just taken the heater down and avoided all the drama." "And then we would have been one of the houses with frozen pipes," I pointed out. "Emma would have been a week old, coming home to a freezing house and water damage. No thank you." "Still," Grace said, "you stood up to a bully, that matters." Our kids will grow up knowing their dad does not back down when he is right. I had not thought about it that way, but she was right. My older 2 kids, Jack and Sophia, had been aware of the HOA fight, at least in kid terms. They knew that The mean lady had wanted Daddy to take down the heater, and that Daddy had said no because it kept us warm. They knew the mean lady had done bad things and gone to jail. Not a bad lesson about standing up for yourself and facing consequences for your actions. Summer in Riverside Meadows was peaceful. The neighborhood kids played in the streets, families gathered for barbecues, and the community pool was packed every weekend. Michael Torres organized a neighborhood block party in July, the first one in years. Nearly every household attended. People who had barely spoken to each other before were suddenly friends. Adversity and the removal of Patricia's toxic influence had brought the community together. I found myself elected to the Architectural Review Committee, a position I accepted with some amusement given that the Architectural Review Committee had been the source of my original problems. But now the committee actually worked the way it was supposed to, reviewing applications fairly, approving reasonable requests, and only denying things that were genuinely problematic. We approved a basketball hoop for one family, a shed for another, and yes, 3 more backup heating systems. Fall came around again, and as the temperatures started dropping, I checked on my backup heater, still in perfect working order. My main furnace was also running smoothly, but I was grateful to have the backup there. Once you have lived through a furnace failure in an Illinois winter, you never quite trust a single point of failure again. In October, I received a letter from Ellen Shapiro. The insurance company had successfully sued Patricia for their payout, and as part of the settlement, Patricia had been required to write apology letters to all 9 homeowners affected by the frozen pipe incident. Ellen included a copy of mine. The letter was brief and clearly written by Patricia's lawyer rather than Patricia herself. It acknowledged that her decisions as HOA president had been inappropriate and had contributed to the damage my neighbors suffered. It expressed regret for any hardship caused. It was sterile, formal, and completely lacked genuine remorse, but it existed, which was something. I filed it away with all the other documents from that period and moved on with my life. Winter came, and with it, the usual Illinois cold. But this time, no one in Riverside Meadows panicked when the temperature dropped below zero. Several families had installed backup systems. Others had upgraded their furnaces to newer, more reliable models. Everyone had learned from the previous year's disaster. Patricia Henderson was released from prison after serving 18 months of her 3-year sentence, getting out early for good behavior. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she moved to Arizona to live with her sister, far from HOAs and Illinois winters. I hoped, for everyone's sake including hers, that she had learned something from the experience. But that was no longer my concern. The backup heater that caused so much trouble sits on the side of my house to this day. It is still just a gray metal box, functional and unpretty. But every time I see it, I am reminded that sometimes the right choice is not the easy choice. Standing up to Patricia and the HOA was stressful, expensive in terms of time and emotional energy, and would have been risky if I had been wrong. But I was not wrong. The heater kept my family safe. My refusal to back down exposed corruption and abuse of power that might have continued for years. The legal consequences that Patricia faced were not my doing, they were the result of her own criminal actions. I just happened to be the catalyst that brought everything to light. These days, when new families move into Riverside Meadows, someone usually tells them the story of the HOA president who went to prison for embezzlement and the guy who fought her over a backup heater. The details get a little exaggerated with each retelling, which is fine. The core truth remains. Our HOA learned a hard lesson about the difference between enforcing rules and serving the community. I still live in the same house. Grace and I have talked about moving, but we decided we like it here. The neighborhood is good, the schools are excellent, and the HOA is now run by reasonable people who understand that rules exist to protect property values and quality of life, not to feed someone's power trip. Jack is 10 now, Sophia is 8, and Emma is 2. They play in the yard, ride their bikes around the cul-de-sac, and have friends all over the neighborhood. They are growing up in a community that works the way communities should, where neighbors look out for each other instead of looking for violations to report. On particularly cold nights, when the wind howls and the temperature drops below zero, I sometimes walk outside to check on the backup heater. It is usually not running because the main furnace handles the load just fine. But it is there, ready if needed, a silent guardian against the kind of disaster that struck 9 of my neighbors that January night years ago. The metal is cold to the touch, frost sometimes coating its surface. It is still ugly, still just a utilitarian box doing a job. But I would not change a thing about it. That ugly metal box cost Patricia Henderson her freedom, her reputation, and her house. It cost the HOA insurance company $240,000. It cost 9 families thousands in repairs and months of stress. But it cost me nothing except some fines I never paid and some stress that turned out to be worth it. Because when my furnace failed at the worst possible time, with a newborn about to come home and temperatures at record lows, that ugly backup heater kept my family warm and safe. And that is all that really matters. The HOA can say whatever they want about aesthetics and property values and community standards. At the end of the day, keeping your family safe and warm is more important than keeping up appearances. I learned that lesson. Patricia Henderson learned that lesson the hard way, and the whole community of Riverside Meadows learned it together. Sometimes standing up for yourself means fighting a battle that seems small and petty on the surface, but represents something much larger. My fight was never really about a heater. It was about whether common sense and safety would take priority over arbitrary rules and personal power. It was about whether homeowners had the right to protect their families without being punished for it. I won that fight, though I never set out to be a fighter. I just wanted to keep my family warm. Everything else, the board upheaval, the criminal charges, the lawsuit, the imprisonment, all flowed from that simple desire to protect the people I love. So the backup heater stays. It is approved now, officially and without controversy. But even if it was not, I would keep it anyway. Some things are worth fighting for, even against an HOA president who thinks she is above the rules she enforces on everyone else, especially against someone like that. The story of HOA President Patricia Henderson and the backup heater has become neighborhood legend in Riverside Meadows. New board members are told about it as a cautionary tale of what not to do. Homeowners share it as a reminder that standing up to injustice, even in something as mundane as an HOA dispute, can make a real difference. And me. I am just a guy who installed a heater, refused to take it down, and accidentally brought down a corrupt HOA president in the process. I go to work, come home to my family, coach my son's soccer team, and live my life. The backup heater hums quietly on the side of my house, a testament to the fact that sometimes the right choice is also the stubborn choice. Patricia is in Arizona, probably complaining about someone's landscaping choices or the color of their mailbox. The 9 families affected by frozen pipes have repaired their homes and moved on. The HOA functions smoothly under competent leadership. And my family is warm, safe, and happy in a house protected by an ugly gray metal box that once cost an HOA president everything. That is my story. That is how an HOA said my backup heater was ugly, and how pipe freeze cost them more than they could have imagined. Not just in money, but in reputation, leadership, and the trust of an entire community. All because one person thought rules were more important than people and learned the hard way that they are not.